We will begin shortly.
Okay, welcome to the August Park Commission meeting. We'll get started if everyone could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Repeat with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Can we have roll call?
Sure. Commissioner Mary Lise? Here. Commissioner Okello? Present. Commissioner Mena?
Present.
Youth Commissioner Abad? And Chair Bonilla?
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, do we have any public comment that is not part of the action items?
We do, Chair. There are 4 public comments. First is Chena Boniki, followed by Edmundo Larenas.
And those are not to do with the flood park? They are. So those will go under action item 4.2, and we'll hear those after the presentation.
Okay.
Are there any others that aren't?
Edmundo is also.
Edmundo, is that part of the flood park, sir? Okay. Please come up.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Edmundo Larenas. I am a board member of the Committee for Green Foothills. I've lived in Moss Beach for over 25 years. First of all, I'd like to thank County Parks for their acquisition of Tonitas Creek. I'm very happy to see you all doing great work down there, and I think it's going to be one of the gems of the coast, and I know that it's also going to be a challenge for county parks. I would like to say also thank you for the recent signage that's come up at the Fitzgerald Marine Reserve. We're very happy to see that. Over the 25 years I've lived in Moss Beach, I've seen a lot more visitors come to our coast and visit our beaches, and in particular the Fitzgerald Marine Reserve, and I actually think that's a good thing, but it being a good thing, but it also means more management, and I'm very happy that Parks has recognized that. An important point I'd like to make is that there is a Fitzgerald master plan. Many call it an old document, but it's still relevant. The folks who worked on that document were marine biologists. Bob Breen, who was a naturalist at the reserve, worked on that document, so there's a lot there that's relevant, and I urge the county to look at that document and consider it a guiding document for protection of the reserve. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other?
Yes, next speaker is Mary Larenas, followed by David Kine.
Mary, are you speaking on Flood Park? No. Okay, come on up. Thank you.
So good afternoon, Commissioners and folks in the audience. I'm Mary Larenas, and I live in Moss Beach. I've been fortunate to live next to the Fitzgerald Marine Reserve for almost 25 years now. So I've been tasked with on behalf of about 11 people to say welcome to Peggy Jensen and Nick Calderon in their new positions as Assistant Director, Interim Director of County Parks. And I see that Nick is not here. So where is that boy? But anyway, I've worked with Nick. A lot of us have worked with Nick a long time, so we really look forward to meeting with him. So on a note regarding the Fitzgerald Master Plan, I would like to point out a concern. It says that there is a summer intern who's going to be responsible for reviewing the Fitzgerald Master Plan to identify areas in which the department can further position the reserve as an educational site. This intern is a senior at San Francisco State University in recreation, parks, and tourism. I think these focus on visitation and tourism. I'm really concerned because the master plan took, as my husband just said, that there were a lot of people involved in putting this master plan together, and already several areas are outdated. I've read it. Several of us have read it. We've taken hours and hours. There's a lot of back data you have to look up. There's a lot of information you need to read before you can even read the master plan to understand it, and to task this to, with no disrespect to this intern, I think this is a pretty heavy task to put on such a junior level person. So I really encourage you to consider someone more senior to review the document. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our last speaker under public comment is David Klein.
It was about Flood Park.
Okay.
About Flood Park? No. Oh. And your name? Do you have her speaker slip?
Yes, I think that's for item number 6 for the superintendent report.
Well, why don't you come on up? We've heard the other two. Okay. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for your time and effort spent on San Mateo County Parks. My name is Chris Lannon Lang, and I am a CGF board member, a Fitzgerald Marine Reserve neighbor, and a neighborhood watch captain near the reserve. I too wanted to welcome Nick. I was hoping that he would be in attendance today, in particular for thanking him for moving forward with some new multi-language brochures for Fitzgerald Marine Reserve. I can show you the ones that my husband and I paid out of pocket to have translated and mocked up for county parks in February. And it's really nice to see that this project is moving forward. Just last week or the week before, we had a group of over 100 primarily non-English speaking visitors arrive at Fitzgerald Marine Reserve starting at 7:15 in the morning. The park doesn't open until 8. So we had over 100 people down at the reserve without any comprehension of what the reserve was about, how to behave in the reserve. They were given a tour of the bluff and then allowed to go down into the reserve without reservations for tours and without permits for the picnic area. One of the members had 2 dogs. Staff attempted to communicate with them, but wasn't able to because he didn't speak the same language. So I am thankful that Parks is moving forward with the brochures on a 2 to 3 month timeline, but I'm asking that something be done before the summer is finished so that docents, volunteers, neighbors, park staff, etc., can communicate basic operating hours and rules within the reserve. I also wanted to, many of you were copied on a letter that I wrote to Supervisor Horsley regarding the recruitment process for the new director. I can distribute copies or I can send them through your assistant so that you have a copy of that again. But it's hard to imagine that the acting director performing both of her roles for any extended period of time. I hope a timeline for filling this important position is confirmed soon. Right now it's an open-ended, no timeline for filling this important position. I hope that you will create a timeline for filling this soon.
Thank you.
Can I?
No,
No, okay.
unless you get somebody else to give you
Okay.
some time.
Thank
But
you.
thank you. And
Thank you.
we would love to, I believe we saw that, but if you want to resend it, you can definitely send it to Parks and we could get your letter again. And if you want to add in addition what you were going to say, we'd also love to hear that. I believe we will be having some discussion on the director recruitment
Great.
later on in the meeting.
Okay. Thanks
Thank
again
you
for
so
your
much.
time.
And thank you for all your work.
Yeah.
Chair Bonilla, there's no more public comment.
Okay, thank you. Okay, then we'll go to our first action item. We have the Friends of Fitzgerald presentation. Hello and welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Tom Ciotti. I'm the current president of the Friends of Fitzgerald. I'm here with Marcia Cohen. She's one of our board members. I've been a member of the Friends of Fitzgerald for almost 30 years. I've been a volunteer and a board member since 2003. Thank you for all your work, too. It's been about 5 years since we've been before this group, and we thought that it might be opportune to just come here and give you a little overview, a little information about the Friends, and a little bit of information about what we're up to. So here's just a brief overview. This is what we're going to talk about today. Who the Friends of Fitzgerald are, our mission statement, a little bit about our history, working with the county to achieve goals and objectives, talk a little bit about the master plan, which a couple of people have already mentioned, and sort of where we're going. So we have a very simple mission statement. It's quite short. I'm not going to repeat it. It's there for everybody to see. I will say that just about everything that we do fits into this mission, and this is what we really are all about. We don't do very much that doesn't fit within this. This is a photo of Bob Breen. He's surrounded by a group of young ladies. I happened to be there that day. This was taken in May of 2013. The young ladies are from the Catherine Dilmar Burke School for Girls in San Francisco. I have to say that they were a challenging group to take out in the tide pools, challenging in a good way. They were a lot of fun. So a little bit about the history of the reserve. There were two elements to setting up the reserve. The first involved county parks, setting up a county park at the site in Moss Beach. I've looked at all the old logbooks. I know that, very interestingly, 50 years ago, this summer, there were county employees out where the parking lot is now and where the main entrance is. So 50 years ago, you people were out there, scoping the place out. The beginning of 1969, Bob Breen showed up out there. He was the very first permanent ranger and supervising naturalist at Fitzgerald. He was there for the ensuing 35 years. The state's part of setting up the reserve didn't get done until August 4th of 1969, when they passed legislation which basically set up the intertidal portion of the reserve. So they sort of lagged a little bit behind. I think most people think that 1969 is the anniversary of the reserve, but really it started in 68, I believe. So the other highlights of the history are Bob Breen started our group in 1972. It started as a very informal group. He got a bunch of people from Coyote Point who were volunteers over there, and he set up a seashore docents program. And that's the forerunner of our group, the Friends of Fitzgerald Marine Reserve. We incorporated in 1985 as a 501c3 California corporation. Somebody has already mentioned the Fitzgerald Master Plan. That was started in 1997. It was a 5-year project. It got finished in 2002. I think there were a total of 13 public meetings. There were lots of people involved in that. So we still consider that document, we support the recommendations in it. We still believe it's a viable, pertinent document to what's going on out there today. When Bob Breen retired in 2004, he had done all the training of all of the docents out there. Our group took over that task, and since 2004, we have trained all of the docents, including many of the park rangers and aides that are out there now. In 2010, the state passed they actually implemented the Marine Life Protection Act, which had been in effect about 10 years earlier. They implemented it, and they finally designated Fitzgerald Marine Reserve as being part of the Montara State Marine Reserve, a marine protected area. Full protection, no take. Another significant, the last thing I'm going to talk about, which is sort of important, is in 2012, our organization, in combination with the county parks, were very instrumental in setting up the San Mateo County Marine Protected Area Council. This is a council that involves pretty much all the stakeholders who have interest in protecting the reserve out there. Includes people like the California Academy of Sciences, the Harbor Commission, the Parks Department, us, the Department of Fish and Wildlife. So you have to understand the background of this to understand that there are multi agencies, both county, state, and federal agencies that are involved in overlapping jurisdiction and caring for the reserve. I don't think any other county park is blessed with having that much bureaucratic oversight. These are two documents. The first is the initial page of the master plan. The other one is the initial page of the Tenero report, which was an amendment to the master plan. These are two really important documents. They were preceded in 1993 by a document called the Harding Lawson Associates report. I know that these two are online. You can get them online. I'm not sure that the Harding Lawson report is online, but it was instrumented by both the county and the state, because people were concerned about what was going on out at the reserve. There were a lot of people coming out there. It was being loved to death. So they set up this report to really look at the carrying capacity, and they recommended a couple things. They recommended some limitations on the number of people out there, and they recommended a reservation system be made for school groups. The school group reservation thing was implemented then. It was a great success. The master plan, as I said, it's a 72-page document. It covers natural resource management, visitor management, facilities, everything. It's a great document. It's quite detailed. I urge everybody who is interested in Fitzgerald Marine Reserve to look at that document. The last document, the Tenero report, was contemplated by the master plan, and it was actually a scientific study, a resource management done by the Tenero group to determine really what the human impact was on the reserve. They adopted and said all of the recommendations of the Harding Lawson report, and the master plan should be followed to the extent that they could be. So I'm going to let Marcia take over now, and she can do the second part.
Well, welcome, Marcia.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay.
And thank you for your report, Tom.
So quickly, I hope. What I want to do is go over one aspect of the master plan and the Tenero report that focused on visitor management strategies. This is an area where there's been broad agreement between county staff and the Friends of Fitzgerald. The recommendations of both the master plan and the Tenero report strategies included implementation of the reservation system. That's been a success, although it's taken years to implement, and we do continue to have issues. However, as a result of implementing the school reservation system, which requires groups of 10 or more coming over to the reserve to reserve through the county's reservation system, and as a result, we no longer have scenes like this. This is more what Pillar Point looks like during the school year, but we have limited the total numbers to 100 students at any one time at Fitzgerald, and that's been a success. Groups showing up without a reservation are supposed to be turned away. It's kind of irregularly enforced, and it's really been dependent on the ranger staffing resources available. Friends of Fitzgerald doesn't have any enforcement capabilities. So the other strategies for visitor management that were recommended by both reports, the master plan and the Tenera, recommended limiting total number of visitors down at the tide pools on any one low tide day to 500. Now, that's a strategy that has not been implemented. You may or may not know, but Fitzgerald can get several thousand people down there, especially if it's a low tide day on a holiday weekend. So it still looks like this. This is an old photo, but it can still look like this and worse. So one of the visitor management strategies was to limit the total number of people allowed down at the tide pools to 500. We hope to continue working with the county. I see Sam's here. We've met with Sam and other county park staff to try to implement some of these visitor management strategies, and we hope to continue that collaboration in the future. We do need to identify visitor management strategies and barriers to implementing. That's kind of an important goal for us. So where are we going? We've, in our meetings with the county staff, we've agreed that we want to establish and reestablish. We used to have quarterly meetings with San Mateo County Park staff to review the master plan implementation progress. We would like to continue to do that. The Parks Director staff or interim are welcome to attend our monthly Friends of Fitzgerald board meetings. We find that to be of value. And we like to be able to jointly communicate areas of agreement so that parks rangers and Friends of Fitzgerald volunteer naturalists are on the same page, and that we are communicating the same message. But one of our major barriers to implementing our goals and strategies has been lack of continuity at the Parks Director position. To quote a longtime influential Friends of Fitzgerald supporter, while Parks Directors, staff, Parks Commissioners, and even county supervisors come and go, groups like the Friends of Fitzgerald have been there without evening out the disruptions with their continued support. Your group has stepped up to bolster staff during budget crisis, provided historical memory that has kept our parks resources strong, played a key role in fostering jurisdictional cooperation, and even created the local MPA Council. The value of your support to our public resources cannot be overstated. We want to thank you very much for your listening to us today, and if you have any questions, we'll be happy to entertain any questions.
I did have one question. What is the reason why we can't keep the number of visitors on low tide under 500? What's been the issues with following that?
Well, there need to be a number of mechanisms in place to limit the total numbers to 500. Right now, it's open. Yeah. It's completely open. So we would have to have strategies to try to control those numbers and prevent visitor number 501 on from going down there.
So nothing's been tried to date?
We've talked about a number of strategies, but nothing has been implemented.
Okay, thank you. I just wasn't sure
if
there had been anything. Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions?
Yeah, through the chair. I'm not clear what specific action you expect, the commission to take. Since this item is listed as an action item, but I think it's been presented primarily as an educational and informational item for us. And so a question to staff, is there any reason this has been listed as an action item? And if so, what specific action is expected of the commission?
I believe from our perspective, there was no action to be taken on this item. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe it was an educational presentation for information for the commission only.
Exactly.
That's right. From our perspective, because there are a number of new members who have not had an opportunity to meet us and to hear what our goals and objectives were, we felt that this was an opportunity to educate and to meet you. And then you have a chance to know who we are and put a face with a name. So it was that opportunity.
Through the chair, thank you very much. I think it's It's a wonderful presentation, and I think we know you, at least personally. If I can speak personally, I know you a lot better than I knew you before, and certainly, have a greater appreciation for the challenges that you do face, and the areas and the opportunities that we have, that we can collaborate on, to make this relationship a better relationship. So to both of you, thank you so much. Tom and Marsha, thank you so kindly.
Thank you again.
Thanks.
Okay, we're moving on to 4.2, the Flood Park EIR. Carla has a presentation, and then we'll take speakers after that.
Thank you. Perhaps someone picked up my notes who spoke. I was worried.
And our computers are on. I mean, I don't Google it.
Rebooting.
Good afternoon, commissioners, county staff, and community members. My name is Carla Schoaf. I'm the San Mateo County Parks Communications and Community Programs Manager. And today our presentation will be divided in two sections. I will review the process by which county parks took to get to the landscape plan on which the EIR is based and reviewed upon. And Stephen Sweet from Rincon Consultants will review the EIR process. And to be clear about what we're asking today, we're asking the Commission to review and accept the final environmental impact report for the Flood Park Landscape Plan and make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors to approve the plan, certify the environmental impact report, and adopt a statement of overriding considerations. So why reimagine Flood Park? We started this process in 2015. The park itself is 25 acres. It's an 80-plus-year-old park. It's gone through some renovations in the past. And historically, the park has really served a very broad, diverse community, including neighbors who live right around the park, as well as people who are close by, communities of North Fair Oaks, the Bellhaven area of Menlo Park, and even East Palo Alto. The park is really known for the place for a lot of community members to hold their very key family events, whether that be quinceañeras, birthday parties, family reunions. It has some real significance to this broad community. And I would note that visits have progressively increased since the park reopened in 2012 following the SFPUC pipeline work. So most importantly, what prompted us to begin this process were the existing park conditions. The baseball field was last used in 2012, and as you can see, the conditions are not the best for playing ball. And this was really as a result of the park being shut and the field not being used for about a year during that period of time of pipeline work. And certainly a lot of squirrels having their heyday, and also irrigation systems being rather dated and would extensively have to be replaced to make it in play-worthy condition. In addition, the tennis courts are not in play-worthy condition. They get very little use, as well as the playground, which is very popular, yet as it ages, we either need to replace parts or remove those parts to make sure it meets our safety standards. So there are some significant features of this park that aren't being used, which is unfortunate. during this process, it was really important to engage the communities that I just listed earlier and make sure that there was a real broad range of voices reflected in our process. So we did this through outreach, park neighbors. We have 1,000 addresses on our notification list. Through email, we have about 120 folks on our notification list, as well as through social media. And I would say we had quite an extensive participation in total of all the meetings. More than 500, about 500 people attended the meetings, 220 participants in the survey responses. We engaged some really great community groups, including the Friends of Flood, which was an existing group at that time, the City of Menlo Park, Siena Youth Center, and sports groups as well. And it was important to us to, when possible, to have Spanish translation available at the meetings, as well as Spanish language materials. So each meeting was facilitated and to make sure that we, number one, stayed on track, but also make sure that a lot of people had the opportunity to speak up and have their interest and concerns represented. And sort of first off, we asked people to tell us what their priorities were for this park as we moved forward beyond just repairing some features, but really taking a whole new look at the park and to see if we could meet the growing needs of the community and the interests. So these are some of the priorities that we identified, and as well as, most importantly, people were looking for new active uses. So there's active and passive recreational opportunities at this park, and some of the new active activities were a exercise area, a pump track, but also at the same time preserving some of the things that the park was known for, and that is the trees and a gathering place in the park. Through this process, we're able to identify what the features are that are important to the community, as well as existing, as well as some new ones. So obviously sports fields are a demand in this area, and at the present time we had one field which wasn't usable. But in addition, play features were very important, and beyond your standard sort of swings and slides was something considered to be open play as well as all abilities play, so that the great thing about all abilities is people who may have some physical limitations can play along with some folks who don't. So it's a very inclusive concept. And then while community gardens came up, the majority of the people really sort of fell on interest of a demonstration garden. And a demonstration garden has a lot of opportunities for education as well as engagement. And that could be educational in terms of how to plant, sustainable gardening measures, and drought-resistant materials. So all of this process brought us to this preferred landscape plan. In the last two meetings during the engagement process, we narrowed down to three sort of concepts of the landscape plan, and that was a natural, a central park, and an arts and culture. Through a previous slide, you saw dot boards, and we also had groups working at tables. We identified that the Central Park was the most popular with 37 votes. And then we took it a step further and we asked those folks to sit at tables and tell us even more about what they liked, as well as what would make the Central Park plan even better. And so that is how we got to this landscape plan. And this is the plan that the commission approved in April of 2016. And this is the plan which informed the EIR process. I'm now going to turn it over to Stephen Sweet.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Thanks for having me. Thanks to Carla and Sam. My name is Stephen Sveet. I am the principal in charge of this project, and I want to acknowledge some of my team members who did really the lion's share of this analysis work and engagement work. One is our project manager, Jonathan Berlin. And then we had one subconsultant firm, W-Trans, doing the very important traffic analysis, and that was led by Mark Spencer at W-Trans. A little bit about CEQA, just for the uninitiated. So the EIR stems from a 1970 law, the California Environmental Quality Act, which requires that decision-making bodies must consider the environmental effects of their action if there are physical effects of the action. So the landscape plan did qualify because there'll be lots of physical facility modifications if and when adopted. And in fact, we have the highest level of analysis required, the environmental impact report. The purpose of the law is to disclose the environmental effects to the decision makers. 2, to provide mitigation measures for whenever possible, for any identified environmental impacts. And 3rd, and very importantly, to involve the public and other agencies in the decision-making process. And here in San Mateo County, had a very robust public involvement component. And the EIR, and here on the screen you see the overall schedule of the process. The real public unveiling of the CEQA process was back in 2012, where we had a scoping session. We broke into 3 groups and gathered input, and then gathered back together and documented all of that input. That input was helping guide or scope the analysis. For over a year after that date, we worked with county parks to conduct our analysis, and also some revisions were still being worked out on and getting details about the landscape plan. So we worked hand in glove with them, developed an internal draft product that was finally approved, and we released for the legally required 45-day review, which commenced in October of 2017. We received public commentary, and quite a bit of it, in fact. I think there were 69 comment letters, and we're required by law to respond in writing to those letters and make any corrections that are warranted that have been pointed out by the commenters. So we do editorial, addenda errata, and we package that all together into a final EIR, which was posted online in May, about 2 months ago. I'll note that if you've seen the comment and response document, it's actually thicker than the original draft EIR. It's quite voluminous. As I said, 69 letters. Importantly, there are 2 topical responses for the recurring comments, and sort of a character to sort of summarize how we're responding to noise impacts, number 1, and also transportation impacts, number 2. Type of EIR. This is, there's been some discussion about that with the community as well. We call this, it's a project level EIR, meaning we have a defined project here at the landscape plan, but it's also a little bit of what we call a programmatic EIR, meaning that this program will be implemented in 3 phases and dependent on funding. So it may be years before some of the features are actually realized. That puts it into a little bit of a programmatic category. And there was a lot of commentary on that. What about this? And so there is some lack of precision on some of the features, and we acknowledge that, and we analyze to that level of detail. Yes, certainly. Did you? Right, and I mentioned the programmatic features. One in particular, by the way, is the precise limit line of one of the lacrosse soccer combo field. We have analyzed it as a 100-foot field, and that's what we're going with, and that's what our primarily noise analysis was based on that parameter. However, we know from the park department that may, when we get into final design, get modified somewhat. That's a question. There may be other features of the park that have funding hurdles or other things. And so when those changes, when those details become finalized, before implementing them or moving forward on construction, we will check back with this EIR and verify that things were analyzed properly. If not, some additional work may be warranted.
So would that require an additional EIR or?
Depends.
Or
Sometimes
or
it's,
what is it
the
gonna
least
require?
form is what we call an addendum.
Okay.
So we would actually, it wouldn't even be a publicly noticed change. It would just be a note for the record that would come before you for and eventually the Board of Supervisors for an approval. And that would be analyzed and described why it does need further review. But there are several stages. You know, you could do what we call an initial study, mitigated negative declaration, or the worst case scenario, a supplemental EIR. So various levels, depending on how much change transpires on the base landscape plan here.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. So we evaluated impacts there are 17 issue areas in the CEQA checklist, we call it. And we screened down to 10 of those that got a full EIR analysis. Some of those are listed here. We also are required to look at alternatives. You'll see at the bottom of this slide, we looked at 3 alternatives. Reduced athletic programming, multi-use shared field, and the legally required no project. Nothing happens. Stays like it is. The key, I want to get into these main topics. This slide has to do with the comments, but before I go there, I'd like to talk about the mitigation measures. I mentioned before that we're required to apply mitigation measures when we identify an impact and we can do, and it's feasible. In the case of this EIR, we have 17 total mitigation measures applied in a variety of topical areas. Some of the issue areas after our analysis, required no mitigation measures. There was no significant impact. But some did, like aesthetics. We have 3 measures there. Biological resources. We have 4 there, and 2 of those double for aesthetic because they have to do with tree removal. So we showed them in both locations. We have cultural resource mitigation measures, 4 of them. These have to do with, in one case, there's a building that is proposed for demolition and removal, and that will be required to go through some documentation, the Historic American Building Survey forms. And also renovation of some of the other historic buildings have to comply to certain standards. That's another measure. We have noise mitigation measures, importantly, and these have to do with amplified equipment and air horn use. And also the timing of athletic events is restricted through a mitigation measure. Mainly 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. specifically.
So a quick question, if there are disputes about impact, because I don't think any 2 individuals would agree on
Absolutely
what
correct.
the impact is.
That's right.
And if those disagreements are identified, how, through this process,
Right.
how are they resolved?
Well, we as consultants give our best opinion and recommendation to you as the lead agency representative, and the lead agency decides. We understand there's disagreement, and we're going with however, we're using these standards and these rules, and this is what we go with. So there can still be disputes beyond that, and we can talk about that too. But I will say that the law doesn't require, you can have disagreements amongst experts even, and that doesn't constitute that you have incorrect information. So there can and are disagreements on some of these conclusions. Moving down the list on the mitigation measures, traffic, we had 5 different traffic mitigation measures. And I will note that traffic was the one topic where we have identified an unavoidable significant impact. We call it a class 1 impact. All those that can be mitigated with measures we call class 2. So they're significant but mitigable. So we have 1, and that was the level of service at, I think it's Bay and Ringwood. There's a PM peak hour problem where it currently is already bad, and the project will make it incrementally a little worse. And the reason it's not mitigable is because the geometrics of that intersection can't be modified without purchasing property and demoing buildings and that sort of thing. So we call it Class 1 mitigable. Again, 17 total mitigation measures. I can go in detail into some of the, now we'll go into the comment and responses. I mentioned there were 69 total letters, and we provide 2 topical, lengthy essay-style responses up front. And I think you all have that document. It's here. And I think we'll hear from some of our commenters tonight, later. On noise, there was a bit of a concern about that location, that the athletic activity noise would affect nearby or adjacent residents. And that's true. There will be audible noise. However, we've used a standard that's in the San Mateo County noise ordinance that says if you're 100 feet away, that will mitigate for incidental activity noise. So that was our conclusion here. As you note here in this last line, the exact location and dimensions are yet to be defined. We use the best available information at the time, and that's 100 feet at the moment. You may ask, well, what if it lands 35 feet in the final design? We'll have to revisit it. We'll have to edit this report at that time, but we're not ripe to do that yet because we don't know yet. There's a lot other concerns about noise. We think that the sound amplification restrictions that are already in the ordinance and would be further applied and made stricter by this EIR mitigation measure will address the athletic noise. And there'll be written agreements with the sports leagues that would be required and so on. By the way, these measures are all in this, what we call executive summary table in the draft EIR. So I'm just summarizing those. On transportation, I mentioned there was a concern that the parking demand is inadequate, the analysis of the parking demand was inadequate. In fact, we're showing that we have an excess of parking at this site. We have 375 spaces, and our work, which comes from the ITE 4th edition, which is the International Traffic Engineering Manual, suggests that for a use like this, with these characteristics, the demand would be 125 spaces. So we feel the park has plenty of parking. There's also concerns about intrusion parking in the neighborhoods, and we have mitigation measures to address that as well. Education measures, drop-off programs, and even the requirement for bicycle parking. I will note that our transportation study conservatively estimated that all trips to the facility, to Flood County Park, would come by vehicle, and we know that's not likely true, but we are being conservative. We know from talking to the sports league that especially young people will ride bikes to their practices and that sort of thing. So we believe our traffic impact analysis is very conservative. The drop-off area. These are additional areas where we added mitigation including parking fees inside the facility. The location of the parking payment kiosk would be moved onto the parking lot, and so that we won't have queuing theoretically out into the public street system. And sports leagues would be able to pay lump fees for their activities for parking. So in other words, be issued permits for their members and so on. We had comments that we ignored the effect of lacrosse traffic. We went back in because there's this lacrosse feature was a late addition, I think, to the concept. We did add it in an additional analysis and found that it would have a negligible additional impact. So no change in conclusion there. But as you see here, the Bay and Ringwood Avenue intersection would still be unavoidably affected. Doesn't matter if we had lacrosse or not. I mentioned in transportation the parking, the bicycle accommodations. We have the bicycle parking added, which should help encourage. We know we have a comprehensive bicycle network in the Flood County Park neighborhood. So that should, and we do see increase in generally across society, an increase in cycling as a mode used for trips. So we're hopeful about that. And this is, again, hitting that same issue. The significant impact is identified weekdays. And I want to point that out as well. This intersection has to do, obviously, with commuting, peak hour trips. And so we had discovered that it will only occur really on the weekdays, Monday through Friday, from 4 to 6 p.m. That's where we drop to level of service D using City of Menlo Park standards. And that's another point I may make. We did not use San Mateo County standards. We used, I think, politely and properly City of Menlo Park standards because we're surrounded by them, and it's their street network that we're concerned about impacts on. This line here, the statement of overriding considerations, that's a technical term that means we will prepare a rationale for if the Board of Supervisors chooses, or any lead agency, to approve a project with an identified Class 1 unavoidable impact, then they need to make findings about everything they've done to try to mitigate that effect and the reasons that the approval overrides the effect. So that's what that's saying. We have a draft of that we're working on with county staff now. It will say things like provision of public recreational services and healthy communities and those things. Those are reasons we think that it's worth overriding that traffic impact. Moving on to biology, we have this mainly relates to, let's call it landscape, mature tree systems. We have a number of heritage trees on the facility. Some would be removed to make way for play fields. And we have mitigation measures there which are vetted and common in this application. One-for-one replacement of similar kind and that sort of thing. So the tree removal, that's how we'll address that matter. As I mentioned earlier, it bleeds into the aesthetic matter because it's a matter of the public landscape area, and when we have, obviously, replacement trees will be much smaller and less gorgeous than mature trees that will be removed. On the other hand, we know they will grow back to that canopy size in time. There's a special protection for any trees removed within 25 feet of residences as well. So even beyond the heritage and protected trees, ones that are within the 25-foot barrier will also be replaced, and that's sort of a buffering accommodation. Then more directly to biology is the bird and bat monitoring. So we have nesting bird surveys always required typically when we are removing mature trees. So we'll have qualified biologists before the demolition of the tree or the removal of the tree. We'll have to verify we don't have birds or bats roosting or nesting in said trees. That's how we address that potential biological impact. Let's move on to alternatives. As we mentioned, 3 of them. We did find some of them are, and then we have to identify if they're superior to the proposed project. 2 of them were, for obvious mathematical reasons. If we reduce the size of, or the number of play fields, or we restrict the level of programming allowed on the play fields, then we naturally are going to have fewer trips, and that will alleviate the impact on that Class 1 impact in particular at that intersection. On the other hand, it's negligible. It's still a bad intersection. It's still level of service D, C, or D, we discovered. So, and that's this point here on the second major bullet, which is it doesn't substantially ameliorate the traffic condition. And we note that there's a high volume of public comments, both supporting and opposing the alternative. So there's sort of a split of, but that's the purpose of the alternatives. There are those rare conditions when a lead agency will just, you know what, we like that one better. Let's do that one instead. And so that's the purpose of the alternatives analysis, to allow that option. Perhaps that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions, and I think Carla will conclude the overall presentation.
Thank you, Stephen. So what's the next steps here? we're asking again the commission to accept this report. Doing so would then move the EIR documents to the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors, likely sometime in September. And in addition to that, referring back to something that was noted in the EIR, we will begin the final design process. And that really helps us pinpoint exact locations and dimensions of the park features mentioned in the landscape plan. And in order to do that, we fully intend to have a robust public engagement process that will include workshop with neighbors, park user groups, and other stakeholders to, again, have broad voices heard and reflected in the final plan with designs. So moving forward, again, restating what we're asking you as a commission to do today is receive and accept the final environmental impact report for the landscape plan, which you have already approved, and make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors to approve a landscape plan, certify the environmental impact report, and adopt a statement of overriding considerations. And I think both I and Stephen are available for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Carla. Thank you, Stephen. I do not have any questions at this point. Do any of the commissioners have any questions? And just keep in mind, we have a lot of public comment, so if we can keep any questions to a minimum. Before we go to public comment, I just want to point out a couple of things that I should have mentioned when we started. One thing is we won't be voting on minutes today because it was not included on the agenda. So at our next meeting, we'll be voting on both. And then also number 5 on the agenda will be removed because the Park Foundation Executive Director will not be here today. So with that, we'll start with public comment. I just want to make sure everyone realizes you have 2 minutes. Unless you're given other time by someone else, you'll be called up.
All right, so far we have 15 public speakers. First is Ralph Vomaski, followed by Nettie Woodsman.
Hello, I'm Ralph. I'm donating my minutes to Nettie.
Thank you, Ralph. Nettie,
Thanks, Ralph.
do you have anyone else that's donating their time? If you're donating your time, can you stand up and tell your name so that we could put those cards together?
Clint Gilliland for Nettie.
Chair Bonilla, for public comment, I mean, it's up to you to allow time, right? But usually, for other board meetings, we don't allow time.
Last time I wasn't on the board, but last time they did allow, I think at least one person to donate their time.
Right, but I think it's up to council and they can decide. Yeah.
Matthew?
It says you can do that on your website.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm John Nimblett. I'm one of the chief deputies in the county council's office. And I would note that it is an ordinary process among the Board of Supervisors and county boards and commissions. It's not typically the practice to allow folk to donate time among themselves. Now, sometimes chairs do, in the context of somebody who's got an organized presentation kind of ahead of time, let somebody perhaps have a little more than the 2 minutes, recognizing that they're speaking for a number of people, but it's not typically the case that
they would get 8 minutes.
Exactly. I think it might be more
I
a
don't think
situation
I'll need
of
that much.
allowing somebody something more than the 2 minutes in light of the fact that other people won't be speaking.
Yeah.
Okay. So with that being said, I would prefer that if we can keep your comments.
I'll talk fast.
Okay.
And I did have a petition that I circulated, so that's for a lot of neighbors.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. So my name is Nettie Weissman, and I've been a park neighbor on Del Norte Avenue for over 30 years. Neighbors are very excited about many of the park improvements and not opposed to development of the park, but we are opposed to placing a sports field so close to homes on the southeast side of the park. We're very concerned about the noise, traffic impacts, lack of parking, and changes of use with the current park. I had a handout that you guys got, and it just says Park Commissioners. My name's on the bottom. It says the following is a quote from page 16 of the EIR. Page 16 clearly states this EIR is a project-level EIR. After we consulted with the CEQA attorney, Camus Steinmetz, all activities being proposed should have been equally evaluated, even though different activities are to be built over 3 phases. This was not done. Only some activities for phase 1 were sort of evaluated, and all activities in phase 2 and 3 were just listed at a programmatic level. Picnic renovation and gathering meadow, both high-use activities, are in phase 2 and not evaluated. Somehow the EIR analyzers decided they could pick and choose what activities they would fully evaluate. I want to start with who uses the park now. Neighbors walk the park or use the playground if they have small children, but the primary users of this park are members of ethnic minorities of our communities, many with more limited recreational opportunities. They have many family, community, and church gatherings every weekend during the spring, summer, fall months. An article in the Daily News stated 99,000 people used this park in 2008, just prior to its closure for the PUC work, and the baseball field was not in good repair at that time, is my understanding. They used a trip generation estimate for historic park visitor statistics. The EIR used the period of 2011 to 2015 as representative of use. The park was closed until November of 2011 for PUC work and very slow to recover for years after. The ball field was not in use. The time period was probably the lowest period of park use. They averaged trip counts over a 4-year period to make it look like the daily trip counts were low. There's a lot of picnic use at this park. The EIR only tells us how many players are on a team and how many car trips are likely to bring, but they do not include the number of spectators for games. The Menlo Park Legends want to have league-style games in the park. That was in one of the comments. Those games bring in large crowds. They never evaluated what would happen if multiple games were being played at the same time, plus all the other activities being proposed. Park Ranger Steve Kramer stated at a neighborhood March 2016 meeting hosted by this group that the parking lot is nearly full now during peak periods during the spring, summer, fall. I went to the park Saturday evening just before this was to be presented in June. At 7:15 p.m., there were still 123 cars in the parking lot. This is not an underutilized park. The last master plan of 1983 stated on days when a doubleheader baseball game was being played and park capacity reached 1,800 people, space for picnic use was limited. So what's going to happen to those picnickers when we take over their park? Now we're talking about 2 active sports fields and not just one. I've lived next to Flood Park for over 30 years, and when the park was in excellent shape and used heavily, there was lots of traffic and parking in the neighborhoods as the parking lot was inadequate for the number of cars. Because of this, there's now restricted parking on 10 streets. Nowhere in the EIR is there a projection as to the total park population for each of the phases, along with the cumulative impact of all 3 phases when in use. There is a serious question as to whether there is adequate on-site parking, since the EIR never considered total occupancy of the park. The parking lot is long and skinny. It's 1 car in and 1 car out. The county's trying to say they can mitigate people not parking on neighborhood streets by changing the parking fee structure. But even if they don't have parking fees, people will use the Iris Lane gate to drop off kids and supplies with the field so close. We will have speeding cars down our streets every hour of every day on weekends and after school. No amount of education will change this, as it will just be too convenient. We have a long history of the Menlo Park Police Department not enforcing the no parking on weekends, which right now is April to October. So I ask you, are the picnic users going to get squeezed out with 2 large fields being used constantly? Traffic, I know you're well aware it was amounts that there's this unmitigable traffic impact at the Bay and Ringwood intersection. Even with this impact, the Parks Department thinks you should approve the plan with Monday through Friday afternoon use. There is no way to access Flood Park except by Bay Road. You cannot snake through little back streets. Bay Road is it. I circulated a petition on 4 streets on the southeast side of the park. 90% of neighbors reached from 54 addresses support development of a multi-use field within the space of the current ball field. The multi-use field was one of 3 alternatives presented and the only option that did not involve a field so close to our homes. We live in a quiet, safe neighborhood with many small children. My cat was killed last August by a speeding motorist right in front of my house. I understand there's a big push for sports fields, but neighbors should not be burdened with all the negative effects of a poorly designed plan. Neighbors were the least considered group in the plan proposed, yet the most affected. So I have some recommendations. fix up the ball field and or approve a multi-use field in the space of the ball field. It still meets the park's objectives without having a severe impact on the park, parking, traffic, and neighbors. If you agree to a second field, consider a youth soccer field near the parking lot. There are several areas where a youth field can be built and with much less tree carnage than what is proposed. In the handouts that I gave you, the back page shows 2 locations where there could be a youth soccer field, and I did meet with county staff on Friday to briefly show them a couple of areas where a youth field could be proposed. Youth soccer is really where the need is. That was identified in the community process. I'm not saying that there aren't adults who play soccer and older kids, but under 8 is the huge volume in soccer. Okay, we done here?
We actually gave you 6 minutes.
Oh, you should have told me that, or I would have gone faster. I just want to say, please keep them to their 100 feet, which they stated from spectators. And I just don't see how you can approve this since there's been such a poor job in evaluating the proposed uses and did not attempt to evaluate all the activities proposed.
Thank you. We appreciate your comments.
Our next speaker is David Klein, followed by Joanne Hilsey.
Hi, David.
Hi, how you doing?
Good, thanks.
How's it going, everyone? My name's David Klein. I'm the head varsity coach over at Menlo Atherton High School. I'm also the executive director and founder of the Menlo Park Legends nonprofit baseball program. I'm also a partner with Menlo Atherton Little League, and I'm here on behalf of hundreds of thousands of youth ball players in the area. I grew up playing at Flood Park. I bounced my first balls from third base to first base over at Flood Park. It's a historic field. It's been there since the 1950s. This project's always been about bringing baseball back to Flood Park. Currently, out of season, and even in season, we're sharing the field over at Menlo Atherton High School with about 80 people. So we have a shared varsity and JV over at Menlo Atherton is on one field, and the outfield is shared with softball because we have no other field space. So every year I have to look a dozen or 2 dozen kids in the eye, and they're perfectly good baseball players, but I have to tell them, unfortunately, your baseball career is over because we simply don't have a spot for you. By having, and they're in tears, by having a baseball-only field over at Flood Park, we're going to be able to add a freshman team over to Menlo Atherton High School, which will allow a lot more kids to play baseball. I also know there's an extreme shortage of baseball fields in the area because Menlo Atherton Little League requests rentals from us all the time, along with other baseball organizations in the area. I also do know that obviously soccer is very important and there's a big demand for it. There are 3 full-size lit soccer fields within half a mile of Flood Park. In Menlo Park, there's not one single standalone baseball field. Flood Park was it. There's obviously Menlo Atherton High School, but it's shared and it's used by football and soccer during the school year. So players that play at Menlo Atherton High School, they're unable to play on that field. So I'm here to support the use. A standalone baseball field, multi-use field just really doesn't work for us. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Joanne Hilsey, followed by Clinton Gililani.
I gave my time to her. I'm Joan Hills. I'm a neighbor to Flood Park, living on Del Norte, so a very close neighbor. Thank you, commissioners, for your work on the reimagined Flood Park and to all the others of you who have been involved. Commissioners, I'd like to remind you or point out, I'm sure you know it, you have a big challenge and responsibility to balance all these sometimes competing interests. Taxpayers, park users from nearby underserved communities, sports participants, both organized and spontaneous play, nature lovers, neighbors, and all of those affected by traffic generated at the park. There are many things to balance. As a Del Norte resident, I would just like to say that I'm excited about the prospect of park improvements. They've been needed for a long time. And I also look forward to increased activity in the park. I walk there with a neighbor a couple of times a week, and we would love to have more people involved in activities like that. But I echo some of the concerns that have been expressed about the two hot button issues, traffic and noise. As described, we've already got marginally acceptable traffic levels that cannot really be mitigated. Furthermore, the Iris and Del Norte gate is not identified as a bottleneck, but I expect it will be, because having sports participants carrying their equipment from the parking lot to that place is
I'm sorry,
not as convenient.
You're out of time. If you could wrap it
Okay.
up. Thank you.
So I just ask that you would have wisdom and sound judgment in making your decisions.
Thank you, Joan.
Our next speaker is Sean Ma. Okay. Next speaker is China Boniki. Thank you. Dan McMahon.
Good afternoon, I'm Dan McMahon. I live on Tehama Avenue, 2 blocks over from the park. It's a great park. I look forward to it getting a facelift and becoming more generally available to more activities. However, I think that the EIR acceptance should be delayed for 2 reasons. First of all, there is no mitigation for the traffic issue on Bay and Ringwood, but most importantly, the assessment did not look at pedestrian or bicycle traffic crossing there, or in terms of light conditions in the fall and the winter time. So there's many people who cross that street, leaving Menlo Atherton High School, leaving Laurel Elementary School, and there's no assessment or mention of that, only the congestion of automobiles moving through there. So I think that assessment needs to be looked at or developed to figure out, is there a safety issue that's going to occur there as we increase traffic? It's already I guess I would call it a somewhat dangerous intersection for pedestrians right now, day or night. Second of all, the Iris Van Buren rear gate to the park was not part of the assessment. There's 2 components to that. One is obviously the traffic for pickup and drop off. It's closest to the athletic fields. So obviously that's going to be a queue avoidance strategy that people use to drop off their kids and pick them up. So that is something that needs to be assessed. Second of all, there's a grass strip out there. If parents or drivers are late picking up their kids, there's no doubt that kids will begin milling about on the triangle grass strip just outside the gates. It's directly outside the gates. If you haven't seen it, I would suggest that you go take a look. Just go drive down and take a look at that. I don't want to see any kids get hurt or any kids get sort of lost in that park or just outside of the park in that area. Those are my comments.
Next speaker is Alyssa Navarez, followed by Brian Mansell.
Good afternoon. My name is Alyssa Navarez, and I live in North Fair Oaks. Families in North Fair Oaks have created a petition to encourage the support of building a soccer field in Flood Park. We don't want to see the soccer field go away. Our families worked really hard during the planning process to attend all the meetings. The youth of North Fair Oaks have no priority on any other field besides one, but it is highly impacted, and therefore we are asking that the youth and programs in North Fair Oaks are a priority. In the last day, the petition has over 107 signatures, and I would like to read some of their comments. This is important for me because I've been working with the North Fair Oaks community and they need fields. I have also worked in Menlo Park, and I can tell you that they have enough fields, plenty of fields. They also have more money, so I hope it doesn't come down to that. The fields needed in North Fair Oaks. We have been working to get this field from day one. It would be a shame to see others come in last minute and come away with the field. Practice soccer is a great sport for different ages and also help the kids or teenagers to stay away from problems such as drugs and gangs. This is a great opportunity for everyone, and we know that our community needs more support. Kids need a place to play safely. Playing soccer keeps them out of trouble, improves their self-esteem, and improves community feeling. The community would love to have access to better fields. Giving kids a safe place to play soccer is very important to me. Through working with kids, I am able to see the positive difference that a safe place to play and practice soccer makes. Children from underdeveloped communities need as many resources as they possibly can. I believe that if children from underdeveloped communities have a safe, fun place to go be at, it will help them thrive in a positive way and have an impact on the entire community and future generations. And finally, all children deserve a safe place to have and fun. Underserved and underrepresented children need to know that we, the community, care. This could literally save a child's life. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Brian Mansell, followed by Armando Garcia.
Thank you. I would like to just point out that I've been working in the North Fair Oaks community for the last 20 years on behalf of the Sheriff's Office, working with the Sheriff Activities League. And the biggest thing that our kids don't have is access to fields. They're not able to get fields in Redwood City Park and Rec or Menlo Park Park and Rec because they live in unincorporated areas. We have access to one soccer field. It's impacted, it's hard to park, the streets are narrow, and it's very difficult for people to drop off their kids. And just the impact alone is just, there's too many kids on the field. So for us to have access to another field would be huge for our community. As far as the traffic at Flood Park, I think you should talk to Mark Zuckerberg about the traffic. They think have a bigger impact on traffic than the kids. I personally live across the street from Golden Gate Park in the Polo Fields in San Francisco. I live next to a park. It's going to be noisy. I can't go down to City Hall and halt the Outside Lands concert next week. It's just, you live next to a park, there's going to be noise. I wouldn't take it out on the kids. They're out there to play. They need the parks. They need the space. And we also support a multi-use field. I'm not real sure on the design of that one. I think it can be better designed to provide more multi-use fields for both baseball, soccer, and lacrosse. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Armando Garcia, followed by Marlon Cardenas.
Good afternoon. My name is Armando Garcia, and I'm a resident of North Fair Oaks. I currently live on 4th Avenue, and I'm here to speak on behalf of supporting the soccer field and making it a priority for North Fair Oaks residents. I grew up on North Fair Oaks. I'm first generation North Fair Oaks residents. My parents came from Mexico. I grew up, and I currently graduated from college. I now work for the Sheriff's Office, and I also coach for the San Mateo Earthquakes on the side. All this is a product of me having a soccer field to play in while I was growing up. It was a safe space for me. It allowed me to practice my passion, which was soccer, where I eventually got a college scholarship to play soccer. Now we fast forward to modern times. Redwood City is in large developments. Prices of housing have skyrocketed, and all this is affecting North Fair Oaks. We have families being forced to combine with families and move 3-4 families together to afford the living costs. And all these kids are stuck at home now, just like I was growing up. They need a place to play, or else they're going to go out to the streets, do drugs, join gangs. And like I said, I'm a product of it. I lived it. I know what it's like growing up in that situation. And all that I'm asking for is for these kids to have a safe space to play, because they're being forced out of their homes. They're being forced to move out to different areas. And all that we are asking is for you guys to give us a little bit of space for our kids to play soccer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Marlon Cardenas, followed by Felicia Lee Cardenas.
Hi, my name is Merlin. I am 15 years old. I am part of SMC Earthquake soccer team. Soccer has impacted me in an amazing way by staying out of trouble and being an after-school activity not only for me but for my soccer team. Having only one field in North Fair Oaks is kind of hard to manage because there are over 200 kids practicing on a schedule, being flexible or not. Because there are different teams using the field, it would be great if North Fair Oaks residents had priority to these new fields, as it would give more kids like myself a safe place after school where I could practice. I would also like to thank my coaches for always taking me to me and most of my teammates to our soccer games. They not only waste their extra time of their day to pick us up and drop us off in vans, since my mom works every day including weekends like my majority of my of my teammates. Our parents work hard to pay for things that we need. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Merlin.
Our next speaker is Felicia Cardenas, followed by Brianna Bernard.
Hello, my name is Felicia Lee Cardenas, and from personal experience, I grew up in an underserved community, so I realized the benefit a sport can have on an individual, and so these kids in these underserved communities really have a place in my heart, and they didn't ask to be subjected to their circumstances. All they seek is a chance to have the same opportunity as the rest of their established community. They just want a safe space to play the sport that they love of soccer, and they just want a safe place to be a kid. And for anyone that's ever played soccer or any sport in their lives, they realize the profound impact that it can have on an individual. And this field will magnify the amount of impact that can be had on these kids. And it also shows them that there are people around them that truly and deeply do care about them and their future. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Brianna Bernard, followed by Mason Lowell.
My name is Brianna Bernard, and I've been serving the youth of San Mateo County and specifically North Fair Oaks for the last 2.5 years. I have a very close relationship with a lot of the kids we serve, and to be brutally honest, there are two paths that I see them go down. One is the path of athletics, specifically soccer, and the other is on the streets doing drugs and violence. Unfortunately, only having access to one field makes it very difficult for us to get the amount of kids that we need on a soccer field at one time. And having an additional field will really give us the opportunity to be able to serve more kids in the ways that they need. Soccer is more than just a passion for these kids. It really is an outlet to stay off the streets. And so having this extra field is it's going to benefit their lives more than just having a sport to play. So my hope is that this soccer field will be in use and running hopefully soon. Because I know that our kids could really, really benefit from having this in the communities. A lot of other cities have sports fields dedicated to them, and I don't feel like our kids think that they have equal opportunity in that. I think that they feel that, I've heard personally that they've felt like other cities have more opportunities for field space and for athletics, and that's their one passion. It's the one thing that they are open to talking about. As you can see, Merlin, that's the view from a lot of our kids. And so my hope is that this field will hopefully be in use and be useful to all of our kids that we serve. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mason Lowell, followed by Jennifer Gutierrez.
Good evening. I just wanted to share some of the personal stories that I've heard some of the kids I work through at work. Specifically, two different sides. I do have a decent amount of kids that said they never had the access to soccer, so they never even got the chance to play, which, now that they're young adults and almost graduating high school, they say that they always wish they had the opportunity to play soccer, and how they see that they could have built more responsibility and kind of had something that they can work towards and maybe get some scholarship for college. The other group of kids that I have personally taught to that I wanted to share was a decent amount of kids that are deeply in love with soccer and use it as an escape for socioeconomic problems that they have at home. but they express that whenever they want to practice on their own time or with their friends, they can't do so because there's always a team that's using the field, specifically at North Fair Oaks. As mentioned before, there's only one field, and they have no transportation to get to another field. So many of the kids talk about wanting to practice soccer, wanting to enhance their skill, wanting to spend time on the field, but do not have the time, and instead find themselves at home without anything to do. So I cannot express enough the importance to have another field at Flood Park and the opportunities that would give our kids at North Fair Oaks. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jennifer Gutierrez, and the next speaker, sorry, I can't read the first name, but last name is A.B. Abotes.
Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Gutierrez, and I am the after-school sports coordinator at the San Mateo Sheriff's Activities League. I serve the North Fair Oaks community, and I am constantly surrounded by the kids. I am able to witness the impact that sports has within these kids, whether it is skill level or a boost in their confidence. Most of these kids are also part of our SMC Earthquake soccer team. So not only do we share the field with other teams, but we also share the field with the school, the kids that are part of other after-school programs and stuff like that. I'm sorry. So having a safe place for them to practice is all that I'm asking you all to think about. I personally grew up playing soccer, and honestly, soccer is what got me to the place where I am right now, and I really hope that all these kids are able to play the sport that they like. Thank you.
Our next speaker is with the last name Abotes, followed by Bill Lampkin.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Hi, my name is Maria, and I live in the North Fair Oaks neighborhood. Growing up, soccer was always my desire and my passion. And you know what each code says? In order to perform well, you need to practice, practice, and practice. I would practice in my backyard, which was all cement, because I never had the opportunity to practice in the field because they were always full and in use. Flood Park would be the perfect fit for kids to have a field to practice on and make their dreams come true.
Our next speaker is Bill Lampkin, followed by America Nava.
Hi, my name is Bill Lampkin, and I'm a 30-plus year resident of Tehama Avenue, which is, as my neighbor Dan said, 2 blocks from the park. And like my neighbor Dan, I look forward to the upgrading of the park. I think it'll be great. However, I think the EIR needs to go back and have a redo. And here are some of the reasons that I believe that. The EIR needs to include a full analysis of all 3 phases to determine the full impact of the project. A detailed analysis is only done for phase 1, whereas the environmental impacts of phase 2 and 3 are done at a programmatic level. Phase 2 and 3 will both have a significant impact on the use of the park. Approval of the EIR is tantamount to approval of phase 2 and 3 without fully knowing user population, frequency, and impact on local residents. There's a serious question as to whether or not an adequate on-site parking supply, since the EIR does not consider the total occupancy of the park. The 1983 master plan does a much better job and should be the format to use in determining parking capacity. The 1983 master plan shows the level of attendance for Saturday, Sunday for the various months. Park capacity is shown to be 1,800 people. High season activity, mid-April and October, showed 9,000 people per week, with 1,200 to 2,400 people with baseball doubleheaders being played. Nowhere in the EIR is there a projection as to the total park population for each of the phases, along with the cumulative impact of all 3 phases when operational. I would highly recommend that copies of tables 1, 2, and 3 of the 83 plan be included along with the EIR to give some historical use. It may be old, but it does have its uses. The historical,
5 seconds.
The historical recreational, I was to get somebody else's time, I don't know. Well, the historical recreational use and the projected recreational use shown on table 6, page 29, shows there were a total of 170 events historically played and 292 249% increase over previous use. It is interesting to note there are no baseball games played in May, nor are there any soccer games played in June, July, or August.
Your time is up. We'd
Okay.
be happy if you want to send us more comments by email.
All right, these have all been sent at one point in response to the EIR.
I think we probably have them then. Thank you. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is America Nava, followed by our last speaker, Elise Newton.
Hi, my name is America Nova, and soccer for me has been a great way to relieve stress. I'm a high school student, and sorry. School can be really stressful sometimes. My team and I practice at the Fair Oaks Elementary School, which means we only have one field to play on. There are many other teams who also need to practice, but we only have one field. Now tell me, how do we fit over 200 kids who love to play soccer on one field? When we practice, we only get one little part of the field, so that doesn't really give us enough space to practice. There are around 5 other teams on that field in each session. You might think, oh, one big field is enough for 5 teams, but you're wrong. It's not. So I encourage you all to let North Fair Oaks residents have priority over these new fields, since we don't have access to the city fields. Thank you.
The next speaker is Alice Newton, followed by our last speaker, Alexis Tarche.
Can you project the plan on the screen? The picture of it? So, thank you. I am Alice Newton. I live on Del Norte Avenue, right immediately adjacent to the park, and I have lived there for 31 years. One of the main things I want everyone in this room to know that I think it's fair to say that the neighbors who live adjacent to the park and the streets right close by there, we are not opposed to soccer. My kids grew up playing soccer. We are not opposed to having a soccer field in the park, and that has been a big misunderstanding for 3 years, I think. Now, what we would really like is to see a location over, we'd like to have the sports section of the park along the parking lot. The top right corner is where the Iris Gate is, and that is a pedestrian gate along our street. It's exactly the right place for all the bicyclists and people who come over the footbridge from East Menlo Park. They will come right across a few streets down. That's where they should enter. But then they should go on. And the park, if the field is where it is, that is the place you've heard before where it's going to be really convenient to drop off and pick up and unload, and not okay for our streets. We already have restricted parking on those streets, and that's because of past experiences with a lot of traffic. And I don't think it's right or prudent or enforceable to expect the Menlo Park Police Department to enforce restricted parking. We should have the sports field close to the parking. And every Saturday for the last few Saturdays, and many times, we go over there. My husband and I go over with our grandkids. There have been about 190 cars at 4:30 over there. And that is in the first 2 legs of the parking lot where it says SPUC pipeline. Under the word pipeline, you can see dark images. That's rolls of turf. That whole area has been blocked off. But these other 2 have about 200 parking spaces, and that's been pretty much full. So if you add all these other sports, then I think it's a big problem. I just would like one little thing. Where I live, there are volleyball courts projected to be put, and when there are activities with group picnics right over there, like at number 13, 15, and those picnic areas, when there's impulse noise of people playing games or things like that, it's just an occasional thing, and we can hear it. My house is about 100 feet from there. We can hear it really loudly. If we had that soccer game with games from 9 in the morning till 8 at night, every Saturday, every Sunday, all year round, that's a really different thing to be asking us. That's why we would like the field to be studied, found a different location.
Okay,
So,
thank you very much.
Thanks.
Our last speaker is Alexis Tarche.
Good evening. I'm Alexis Trichet. I just wanted to share my story, and I'm in support of having priority fields for the North Fair Oaks community. I hate public speaking, so please bear with me. um, we're here for the kids at the end of the day, and like most of the people that we work here at Sal and we coach soccer for the Earthquakes, it is really hard. Our soccer field that we have right now is not a huge soccer field. It's barely regulation size for a soccer field. We split it up. Five teams are coaching at the same time during practice, and we have a small corner of the field, which isn't adequate, especially when you have high school girls out there trying to train. In addition to that, I'm also first generation college student. Graduated with my, sorry. Which is funny. I graduated with my master's in mental health, and it's funny because I'm having like anxiety right now because I don't like public speaking. And it's funny because it's not even that scary or intimidating. I don't know, it's something I have to get over. First generation, my family has been in gangs and drugs and things like that. Soccer has always been an outlet for me. And we're doing full circle, working with the kids as well, because it is also their passion. And we're trying to provide a safe space for them. And it is really hard. Like the Menlo Atherton coach that was here saying, we have to tell kids, sorry, you can't practice or you can't play. And unfortunately, we have to cut practices very often with our girls because, other people have to use the field, and we cut practice, and it would be really great if we have access to a field that we could call our own because we're sharing it with so many people, and it's very difficult. Thank you.
No more public comment, Chair.
Thank you. So now I would, does the commissioners, anyone have anything to say on this, or does someone want to make a motion? What they're asking us to do is on your screen in front of you.
I wanted to say something.
Sure.
I wanted to thank everybody for coming, for one. I know this is difficult. Nobody really wants to spend their afternoon speaking in public and being involved in kind of a small fight. Everybody feels really passionate. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. And I see both sides. It's going to be really difficult to balance everybody's needs in such a with so many things going on in this park. I feel like we do need these amenities in this park. I feel like there's a need in this area. And this process has been going on so long. I feel like everybody has their say at this point, and I think we do have enough information to make a judgment because we have so much information. And I want to thank everybody for sharing their stories and their opinions. And I'm going to be thinking about everybody's comments. And it's much better to have them in person than it is to read them. I read them all, but I'm really thankful that you came in public and we got to see the faces behind the comments. So thank you.
Yeah, through the chair, you know what's really interesting to me is that when Flood Park got created back in the 30s, if you can for a moment just imagine what the population of San Mateo County was. It's certainly not what it is today. When it was built, I think 101 was a two-way street. Now 101 is a 6-lane on each side. The population has significantly increased over time. There are more people in San Mateo County And unfortunately, there are fewer and fewer resources. I was a Parks and Recreation Director, and park space and sports facility spaces were not there for the number of kids or even the number of adults. We adults need to exercise as well, for the number of adults that needed them. And so I think we have an opportunity here. This happens to be a regional park, a park that is intended to serve the entire everybody that resides in San Mateo County, whether they come from North Fair Oaks or whether they even come from Daly City. And so what I would love to ask the neighbors is to try to accommodate our need, because I think we do have a big problem. We need spaces for people to indulge in activities that would enhance their health. I think that is an objective that I don't think anybody can disagree with. And to the young people that spoke, I also want to tell you one thing. You have more choices than sports and criminal activity. Nobody mentioned school. School is a choice. If you can devote as much time in school, then you have a better chance of becoming the engineer, the lawyer, and there are more engineers and lawyers and doctors than there are soccer players or baseball players. So let's just think about it for a minute. Don't limit your choices. Yes, I love to play soccer. I played soccer on streets. We let the cars go by, then we played. The cars came, we left the road, the cars left, we played soccer. I loved soccer. But soccer should not be your only love. However much you love it, think of your other options as well. To the neighbors, I think we have a very difficult decision to make. We totally hear you. Noise is always going to be there. Whether it's noise coming from the 6-lane traffic on Highway 101 or from kids enjoying themselves playing soccer, noise is always going to be around us. So we'll just beg for your indulgence, because we do have a serious decision to make. Thank you.
I don't know where to start, but I'm going to echo what my fellow Commissioner Meta was talking about. I'm just sitting here just in awe. And you guys should be given an applause for even coming here. It took the patience and the thought. Heck, we even have a youth commissioner on here. The thought out interest cards that you all filled and even came and were brave to speak up here. I grew up in San Francisco around sports. I even coach, even currently, basketball, wrestling, powerlifting. We know this is a massive project, and there's, areas where it needs to be improved. And this area is growing and growing and growing. And a lot of kids are moving here, but also a lot of people can't afford to live here. And sports is an outlet. So the fact that our youth is looking to improve their lives by sort of backing away from the negative activities and the criminal activities, at the end of the day, both sides have to come to agreement. And we have to understand that the committee is probably going to revisit this, but for some folks who can't afford to pay lots of money in joining these clubs and joining these organizations, that this is a place that's an outlet. And just a focal point on what Meta said, professional athletes who become professional athletes stay in the game for a long time and sometimes a short time. And these professional athletes leave the sport and become neurologists, become principals, become senators and attorneys and engineers. So look at your focal point of just sports, but try to get academic scholarships at the same time. So I encourage you, kids. I applaud the coaches for coming here, and I really hope that your future is going to be bright. Thank you.
I'm 16 years old and I live in Foster City. I grew up playing sports my whole life, and I totally agree that sports are a good outlet, not just from criminal activity, but I would say from school, because school provides a lot of stress. But I do also agree with Commissioner Akelo about how sports aren't the only options, and school can actually provide numerous uh, numerous opportunities for to make a career. Very few people make it out there as professional athletes, and those who do are very fortunate and talented, and they definitely have worked hard. But at the same time, it's not a guarantee. So school can provide other opportunities, and I I'd like you all to consider that. Thank you.
Okay, so I'd just like to thank everyone who took the time out to prepare their statements and to come here and give us your feedback. In consideration of time, we have about 14 minutes before we're asked to leave this building. I'd like to ask the commission for a motion on this. The recommendation is in front of you. So if someone can go ahead.
To clarify, we're not voting on a final plan. We're voting
No.
to pass the EIR along so that a final plan can be determined.
We're making a motion to receive and accept, and then make a recommendation to the board to approve the landscape, certify the environmental impact report, and adopt the statement of overriding considerations. It's on the screen. It should be on the screen in front of all of us. So if I can have somebody start a motion.
As a commissioner, I'd like to make a motion on this, what we have on task. I'd like to move forward with it.
I'll second it.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? So the commission has decided to receive and adopt the final EIR report. We will be recommending to the Board of Supervisors to approve the landscape plan, certify the EIR, and adopt the statement of overriding considerations. With that, we're going to close the 4.2. So if you're free to leave if you'd like, if you don't want to stay for the rest of our meeting. And we have very short time. I'm going to move next to 4.3, the park director recruitment.
Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Peggy Jensen. I'm interim acting director of the Parks Department. And when I spoke with you at the last meeting, I told you I would update you on the park director recruitment. At this point, I don't have a specific timeline, but what I want you to know is I'm working closely with our Human Resources Department to assure that we have a very strong pool, and we have a number of people who we recruit a good pool of folks from which to interview a parks director. I also want to add that we will have an inclusive process. We're going to be working with a variety of folks from a lot of interest groups that are interested in the parks. So I expect that we probably will have a new director maybe late this year, sometime early next year.
I'm not going to ask for any question just because in light of time, I wanted to move to 4.4, the work plan. And I'll start with Peggy on that, and then Maida will take yours.
Okay. In terms of a work plan, I'm working with the Parks Department staff to put together a calendar for the Parks Commission to make sure that you all know what the upcoming topics will be in future meetings. We're also considering having short presentations by different friends groups, different groups who are associated with the parks, to provide you with additional information. We'll be presenting this plan to you at your next meeting and look forward to your feedback on that.
Thank you. Maida,
So
did you
through
want
the
to?
chair, so
Yes.
this is a plan that the Parks Department is preparing, and this is not in reference to the Commission's work plan?
It's separate from the Commission's work plan.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'd like to talk, but what I hope we can do at the next meeting is talk about how your work plan is incorporated into the meetings that you have scheduled over the next year or so.
Then I would suggest, just for the purposes of the public and certainly for the purposes of the commission as well, that whatever it is we put on the agenda needs to be extremely clear. Because when it is expressed as a work plan, my conclusion was that we were going to be working on the commission work plan, because that's what we've been doing for the last so many months. So if it had been referred to as a departmental work plan, then I think that would have been a better way of communicating to the public as to what the intent of that item was. Because I was prepared to make some comments about the commission work plan, and it does not seem to be the appropriate place to make those comments.
So just to clarify, Maida, I think you asked for this item to be on the on the agenda. So it was the work plan. I asked Peggy to clarify because we had a conversation around the work plan and adding some additional things that'll probably take place when we revise the work plan, to having more presentations and other things that I think when Peggy talked to all the commissioners that we feel would be a good use of time and also more educational. So this was the work plan, and when we thought you weren't going to be here, we added on to that. So if you wanted to discuss, I know you said that your piece wasn't in the packet, so you're not prepared to talk about it.
No, this is not what Peggy said.
No.
What she just said is not what you're saying. That this was a combination of work plan. What she said was entirely something else. It's a departmental work plan that they're working on. The commission has its own work plan, and at the last meeting there was a report that Commissioner Benet and myself prepared, and I'd expected that to be on the agenda today.
Oh,
and it is not. And from the comments the director has made, the interim director has made, is those comments would not have been made here at all.
So just to clarify again, it was put on when you asked for it to be put on. Unfortunately, your piece was not added into the packet, so we don't have that piece. But when I thought you weren't coming, Peggy and I had discussed this other piece, which is the staff putting together a calendar for us and some other things that aren't directly in our work plan, but they are closely tied to the work plan that we're doing. And so I asked her if she can address that in this 4.4, because I did not know you were going to be here. And it was something we addressed during our conversation around the work plan and some of the things that we were going to do going forward.
I don't think we're communicating clearly. Because when I received the agenda, I was going to be at this meeting. I confirmed I was going to be at this meeting. It's only until today that I called to see whether I could call in to the meeting. Yes. So the decision to make the work plan was not contingent upon Maida not being at this meeting. Maida had intended to be at this meeting all along.
So if I could just clarify, I'm sorry, just let me clarify. When you called and said you weren't going to be here, I talked to Peggy about the work plan when I first got here this afternoon. We thought you weren't going to be here. That's why when you came in. So that's what it is. I don't think it has any, I understand we need to be clearer. I agree with you. And I'll talk to staff about being clearer when we talk about a department work plan or the commission work plan. But I still think if you want to address your concern with that piece that you and Sam worked on that is not in there. And I think that's what you wanted to address when we talked before the meeting, correct?
Well, one thing, because it's not here, it was a very specific report making some very specific recommendations to the commission.
And who has that report?
And Sam presented it, and Sam was told that he could not discuss it at the meeting.
But who has that report? Because it didn't get to staff to get in the packet. That's where we're missing that piece.
Where was the ball dropped? Excuse me. I'm just trying to...
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Who was supposed to get that report to staff to include it in the packet? Because that's, I think, where we're stuck right now. Because Maida, last meeting you asked that this work plan be added to the agenda, but then the piece of what you guys did was not given to staff to get in the packet. So I don't know if you guys have a copy of it and you want to present it now, or how you want to proceed, but that's where we are right now. So if we can stick on that and go forward, it'd be great.
From my understanding, Madam Chair, we could not present it because it was not put on the agenda. because it was asking to take specific action. It was asking Commission to take specific actions. And that's why at the last meeting it was not discussed.
Correct. That's why it's on this
And
agenda.
so consequently, staff should have taken note of that, and staff should have insisted that since it was not, since it was brought to the attention of the Commission, it should have been put forth into the next meeting of the agenda. It was not the Commissioner's responsibility. I think it was staff's responsibility.
How, and I'm just asking this question, if the staff doesn't receive the report, I'm not sure how they could put it in a packet. It's on the agenda, so if we had the piece of work, we could all look at it and do an action item on it. But currently, none of us have it to even review, so I'm not sure how
Through the
that
chair,
was-
what I'm saying is this. Staff is the one that advised the Commission that that item could not be discussed at that meeting.
Okay.
And so
I'm
sta-
sorry,
sta-
Maida.
staff should have taken the next action to say this item is going to go forth to the next meeting of the agenda and made an effort to get a copy of it.
Okay, so let's just, instead of going round and round, it is 5-2. We will not be able to discuss this today because it doesn't sound like it is. Go ahead, Peggy. I think we need to get the report to staff and it'll be placed on the next agenda.
No, I want legal's opinion on this.
Or first, Peggy.
No, I was just going to affirm what you said, that staff will be happy to agendize this item and put it on the agenda in a way where a vote can be taken so long as we receive that information at least a week prior to the next meeting.
Chair Bonilla, I'll make this 30 seconds, and you're doing a great job as chair from the start of this year. So I'm slightly disappointed because Mita and Chairman Okeda, not myself, worked on this substantially, and it's for the benefit of parks and folks that come and visit. How do we increase park awareness from income to age to language to customer friendly? That was a big focal point that both commissioners worked on and we were ready to present. So I hope, I can only hope that we have it in the October meeting. I really do.
Yeah, go ahead, Peggy.
We're happy to and look forward to seeing your report and hearing, listening to your recommendations and having the commission take action on this. And we will put whatever you provide to us on the agenda and distribute it appropriately.
It's pretty nice, actually.
Yeah, well, I thank both of you for your work. I was just a little confused on how we got here. So again, Maida, now I understand what you're saying, and Sam, I thank you for your work, but we don't have it, so we need to push it to October. And Maida, did you want Matthew to address this as well, or are you okay with this?
Yeah, I want Matthew to address it.
Matthew, can you address
Because
it?
Matthew is the one that made the determination that we could not discuss it. The commission could not discuss it at the meeting because it was not on the agenda, right?
Not this meeting, the meeting before, because it wasn't on the agenda for an action item.
Sadly, I was not at that meeting. I had joined the county council's office only 4 weeks ago. So in light of my very vague understanding of what's happened, I think that Peggy's suggestion probably makes the most sense.
Okay, thank you. And again, I apologize,
Thank you.
Maida and Sam. So we'll be skipping 5. We have about 3 minutes for the superintendent report.
Chair Bonilla, we have asked security to extend the time, so
Oh,
Carla has gone.
Okay.
To security, so.
Through the chair, how much more time? Because I do have a lot of questions on the superintendent's report.
I think as fast as we can go, but I think they'll probably have the doors open, maybe 10 more minutes, I believe.
I think if we're not going to give it enough time, I think we should go ahead and adjourn and just have this at the next meeting.
Okay.
Since we
Matthew,
we won't have the EIR to talk about.
Right, Matthew, are you okay with that?
You want to postpone?
Postpone. I would say postpone superintendent, and then if we want to talk quickly about 8, if there's items for future agenda, if anyone has that, and then adjourn after that, and then we'll hear double report from Scott next report.
I think that's fine, especially since it is information only.
Perfect.
I think the only thing that we should, through the chair, point out that is kind of time sensitive, that I wanted to bring to your attention, which is in Carla Schoaf's report, is the ending of the shuttle service on August 26th, which will be coming up pretty soon. We've had this service for 2 years now, and due to it having low ridership and not being something that we're going to move forward and fund again, I wanted to bring it to your attention that it is going to end on the 26th of August. We did learn a lot of good things from this, and the department will move forward in other ways of gaining transportation for people to visit the parks. So I just wanted to clarify that with the board in here so they know, because it is time sensitive, August 26th.
Well, through the chair, I don't think the commission had any authority to change that time frame. I do have a lot of questions about that, and I don't think we have enough time to, to delve into it. The August 22nd, we don't have the authority to make it August 25th. We can't. So we've read the report, and we're very much aware that it is terminating at that particular time.
I just wanted to bring it to your attention.
Thank
that's
you.
all.
Just moving to number 8, does anyone have items for future agenda? The work plan, and if we can get a copy of their work plan report into the next packet, that would be great. Are there any other items?
Some sort of dog implementation committee, or at least have the discussion of how to implement that and how to move forward, maybe with the county council's office, and see what it is we need to do to get the policy up and running.
Okay, so we'll add that onto it.
One more, Chair. There's no September meeting because we don't meet in September, and it's not an even month. But if some folks can attend the anniversary, if we have an opportunity, September 9th, the celebration, we should have received that at home in the mail. The parks executive parks director's not here, so.
Thank you for pointing that out. Yes, I'm hoping we can all be in attendance to that. Are there any other items for the agenda? Okay, if not, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Just one quick second before adjourning, if we can pray for the speedy recovery of a fellow commissioner who is in some needs of strength and healing, which is Commissioner Enrico. If we can all pray that he recovers so we can see him at the next meeting.
Thank you, Sam, again.
Thank you.
Very, very nice of you to remember that. Okay, with that being said, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you again, everyone.
There's a card here for sending. Did you guys sign it?